welcome to Forged from Iron, and a little bit of housekeeping I always do before we get the stream going. Please don't forget to like, comment on and share the stream to your social media platforms. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Make sure you hit the bell icon and you'll be notified of any new content as and when it is uploaded to the channel. As always, we thank you very much indeed for your support in this matter. You are here for the latest installment of our ongoing series, Mount Matty Rushmore. Now, if you are new to this particular concept, basically what we here do at Forged from Iron is we get a guest in the hot seat and we donate to them, out of the goodness of our heart, their own Mount Rushmore, the side of a mountain, you know, where they got the heads of the 4 US presidents. Well, this is a mountain that has yet to have heads carved into it. They can decide the 4 heads of West Ham players that they have seen during their time following the club that they wish to carve into it. Now, they may or may not go route one and go with the best, most skilled players. They may decide to go cult heroes. They may decide to go academy graduates, bad boys. They might choose someone on the basis that they like them as a person. They might choose a combination of these genres or something completely different. It is up to the guest to decide which route they're going to take. It's their mountain. They can decorate it how they wish. And sitting in the guest seat, those of you that are regulars on the channel will recognise exactly who it is. It is Budgie from Greenstreet Elite. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thanks, Rob. How are you, sir?
I'm doing all right, mate. I'm looking forward to this because obviously, and I don't mean to be unkind or disrespectful, but obviously you go a little bit further back than I do, and you would have
most people do, yeah.
Well, you've encountered some of the players that my father talks about with glowing reference, and I know that 2 of them you've got in your 4, and I'm really interested to hear your stories about those 2 principally. But I'm really glad that you've been able to give up the time on a busy day for you, Budge, and contribute to the channel.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to work with you, Rob. Always a pleasure.
Well, likewise, my friend, likewise. So, you ready to get straight into it with your hammer and your chisel, and you're going to go out to this mountain and you're going to beaver away like a mad thing at personal cost.
As long as you foot the ladder for me, I'm ready to start clapping.
I'm at the bottom of the ladder. I'm footing it. I've got a cup of tea in my hand, and I'm just looking up and in amazement at the work that you're doing, mate. So so the first cab off of the rank. Who have we got?
We're going to go with a legend at the club, and not necessarily an obvious legend, actually, from the period that he's from. I've gone for Martin Peters. You have?
Martin Peters, one of the boys of the England's World Cup win.
Yeah, one of the heroes.
One of the goal scorers.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, a lot of people give a lot of credit to Jeff Hurst, and rightly so, for his hat-trick in that final. I also, admire the man greatly. I mean, he has to be one of my honourable mentions, alongside 1 or 2 others as well. But for me, Martin Peters was kind of not undervalued or underrated, but not really spoken about as much as some of the other guys of that period. And I think, a lot of people tend to forget the hard work and dedication that he put into his time at West Ham United. Yes, there is some conjecture with other people about, he left us and went to Spurs, etc., etc. But, it's not about that. It's about his time at West Ham United. And for me, the contribution he made to the club at the time is underrated, it's undervalued, and it's not spoken about enough. And I feel that, because I've had the pleasure of watching him play, I would probably say 20 times in my lifetime, I actually got a chance to watch him play live. Once or twice in the England kit, admittedly, but when he was at West Ham, his work rate was incredible. His positional play was fantastic. His distribution was on point 95% of the time. And his heart was in claret and blue. It was definitely wrapped in claret and blue. Even when he left, he spoke very highly of the club and the staff and the players that he played alongside. So for me, Martin Peters, the first face I want to carve.
Yeah, and I mean, you say that he wasn't perhaps as well regarded, and it's often the trio is given in the order Moore, Hurst, and Peters. Peters is always the third of the three that is mentioned.
Yeah, the tail gunner.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I'm just looking here. I mean, you know, he was at West Ham. His debut season was 61-62. His final season at the club was 69-70, and then obviously he went to Spurs. During the course of that season, he played 7 games in the first division for Spurs in 69-70 season, in point of fact. But just looking at his stats here, 302 appearances in the league, 364 in all competitions, and he scored 100 goals in all competitions, if you please, for a midfielder. And just looking here, I mean, he was the famous quote about him is that Sir Alf Ramsey, the England manager, who was the England manager in 66, described him as being 10 years ahead of his time. And when he went from West Ham to Spurs in 1970, he became Britain's first £200,000 footballer, which now is a sum of money that is probably a week's wages for some Premier League players.
Yes,
but at the time, that was huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, a lot of people tend to forget that back then, I mean, for the average man to work and to earn £200,000, it took them a lifetime to do that. You know, like my dad, I don't think he ever earned £200,000 in his entire life. I really don't. I mean, I remember when I first started working, my first week's wage was £28 a week, which was £11 a week more than my dad was on.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, it was kind of, you know, back then, 200 grand. I mean, that was a mountain of money. I mean, I think if you were probably to equate that to today's money, it would probably be somewhere around the £5 to £8 million mark, I would have thought. Mm-hmm.
But he would, if he was existing, a player of that ilk. I mean, a midfielder, like I say, his West Ham record from midfield, 100 goals in all competitions in 364 appearances. Yeah. He could use either foot. He was decent in the air as well. And his nickname, or one of his nicknames, I'm led to believe, was the Ghost, because literally he would just ghost into the penalty box and get on the end of something, put the ball in the back of the net, or cause some sort of chaos to
and you know, you got all of the other players that were around him at the time, including Bobby Moore and Jeff Hurst. You know, that they knew he was ghosting. You know, they would know. I mean, it was almost like, you know, where's he gone? Oh, right, I know he'll be there, and I'll put the ball there, and he will get it. And 90% of the time that was the case. You know, he was fantastic at ghosting him. Loved him, absolutely loved him as a player. And as you said, you know, today he would probably be worth in the region of 45 million pound minimum.
Oh, I'd say that's probably, I would say you could probably put another 20-30 million on that myself, but that's quite easily. That's an opinion. But you know, Martin Peters, World Cup winner, FA Cup winner. Well, actually, no, I don't think he did win the FA Cup. In fact, I'm saying that no, he didn't.
No, he wasn't with us in 80. He would have won the European Cup. Though,
he won the Cup Winners' Cup in 65, but he wasn't part of the FA Cup in 64, the year earlier. But
yeah, I think he would probably have been one of the up-and-coming players with the club at the time. Because if he joined in 61, 62, what age was he when he joined? About 16, wasn't he? 15?
He made his debut, he was born on the 8th of November, 43. So he'd have been around about 18 years old, thereabouts. I'm just looking here for a little bit of context.
He made his debut at about 20, I think, in his 20th year, I believe.
He might have been about 19, 20, because as I say, it was 61, 62 that he made his debut. So, and he was born in 53. But just looking here, I don't know, and I'm dare say that someone that's going to watch this, and if I could research it a little bit more, I'd probably find out the answer. Maybe it was injury, I don't know, because in 63, 64, he actually played in all competitions, 36 matches.
Right.
So I don't know whether it was an injury or a suspension that kept him out. As I say, I could sort of like have a little look and research it.
Perhaps you can pop it up on the screen when you've done.
Yeah, I'm just having a little look here. Peter plays 5 games. Yeah, here we go. Although he played 32 league games in 63-64, he played no part in their FA Cup run. Oh, so he didn't play at all, and was not selected in the FA Cup final of 64 at Wembley, in which they beat Preston 3-2. Oh, interesting.
Okay.
Doesn't say why. It just says he played no part in the FA Cup run, which is quite interesting, given he played 32 league games.
Yeah. It's a strange one, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is strange.
Oh well, I dare say the only person that probably knows for sure is Ron Greenwood, and he can't answer that question. But there you go. So Martin Peters is the first head that you have chipped away at this rock face, and you've got his mighty visage. One of the boys of '66 is there on the side of this mountain. Britain's first £200,000 football transfer. He's there. So. You've got 3 left, Mr. Budgie, and your hands, I can see from here, are looking quite worn out, but they've got a lot more to go. So where are we going next?
We're going to go with another legend for me. I mean, I don't recall too much about the guy, really, to be fair, because he was around, just before I was born, and I've done a little research on him, and I've watched, video footage of him playing. But mainly, it's the legendary stories you hear about how good he was and stuff. I've chosen Pop Robson, Keith Robson.
You have?
Oh, Brian. Sorry, not Keith. Brian Pop Robson. Keith Robson's a totally different player.
He was. But Brian Pop Robson, talk to me about your memories of watching Pop, because he's what Russ Budden on West Ham Network would refer to as a boomerang player. He obviously had 2 spells at the club, the first at which came between 71 and 74, and then he returned 2 years later and stayed for another 3 years, 76 to 79. Both spells were fairly prolific, it has to be said.
Yeah. I made a mistake saying that he played before I was born, because I was actually born in 62. It was before I was born as a West Ham fan, I should actually say, because, even though my first game that I ever went to was in 66, I was 4 years old. So really up until my early teens, I really weren't that conscious of too much about the game. But what I remember about Pop Robson was that you could always rely on him to run his eye out. You could always rely on him to scramble a goal in if there was a bit of a ping-ponging going on in the box. You could always rely on it being Robson to put it in. He was fantastic in the air. It was almost like he had stepladders wherever he went. He was fantastic in the air, and very accurate with his head also. It's good being able to get up there, but you have to be able to get the ball where you want it to be once you're up there. And he was really good at that. And, he had such good flair about him. I mean, look, I kind of remember him as a balding sort of guy, and at the time I would think he's too old to be playing football like that. But, the guy obviously was losing his hair a little early in life. But also, the one thing I do remember about him is that many of the players that I've heard talking, the ex-players that I've heard talking in interviews such as the ones that you've conducted and Russ Budden has conducted and stuff, everybody to a man has had a healthy respect and admiration for what Pop Robson did in West Ham kit. And as you say, he's a boomerang player, and probably would be my number 1 boomerang player if I have to be perfectly honest with you. His legend lives on, as it were. I mean, even today, people still reference him, as one of the great strikers of his day and stuff. And, as a young kid, when you hear on top of the Pop, Match of the Day, when you hear, we're going to see 2 goals from Pop Robson tonight and things like that, and you think to yourself, you've got the likes of Liverpool and then that were right up there, right at the top of the league and being spoken about still back then, and Manchester United and teams like that. And then you hear them talking about little old West Ham and the great things that Pop Robson's doing in the game. And, you know, it kind of really helped to drive my love for the club, you know, and he's, you know, not solely responsible for that, but he is, you know, he's a major part of why I really started loving the club, because, you know, on the occasions that I was fortunate enough to get up to London to watch the games, you know, and stuff, yeah, it was always him that was, I would see, giving out autographs and chatting with the younger lads and encouraging them, kicking the ball back to them and stuff like that. You know, it was always him that I would see doing that, you know. And, you know, I only ever actually saw him play, I think, twice. But, you know, I mean, I heard stories from people about how he would just turn up and just kick the ball around with the lads at the local playing fields and stuff like that. You know, many other players also did that. But, you know, when we're talking about, he was quite a high-profile player at West Ham at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, he kind of drove my love for the club, you know.
Do you know the thing about him that strikes me as being rather unlucky? He left in 74. A year later, we win the FA Cup. He left in second spell in 79. A year later, we won the FA Cup.
We win the FA Cup, yeah. And it's almost like he was destined never to win it with us, you know.
Yeah.
But it is a shame, but, you know, with the quality of football that he produced and, you know, the memories that not just myself, but many other people of my age and older that remember him, you know, and some of the younger guys, obviously. But those of us that remember him, remember the admiration that he had around the club, around the crowd, you know, and even in the media circles, you know, the BBC and ITV and people like that, they loved him. They loved him. And, you know, he was always one of the guys that always had a smile on his face. You know, he is a bona fide legend, Rob, to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's a player that my father speaks very fondly of, Pop Robson, definitely. I think, obviously, I was too young. I mean, I was born in 75, so I'd have been 4 years old, 4 years old when he left the first time around. So
yeah,
I've not really got any memory of him. I've seen him on footage, and absolutely lethal striker. He knew how to put the ball in the back of the net. I mean, just looking here in his first spell, 120 league appearances. I only got his league information at hand. 120 appearances in the league for West Ham in his first spell with 47 goals scored. And then his second spell, 107 appearances, 47 goals scored. Just a useless piece of information, just because I can. He married a table tennis player, an international table tennis player by the name of Maureen Heppel. Now, did you know that her father his name was Len Heppel, and he's a ballroom dancer, and he actually had a hand in training Pop Robson in terms of, I'm guessing, sort of like balance and movement and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, that actually, that may be, but it's also a familiar piece of information to me, because when I was younger, I was heavily into my sports. I was playing football, I was doing martial arts, judo and kung fu. And a lot of people used to say to me, you know, you're good at what you do, but your balance could be better. So I, at the time, was going out with a girl, and she was a trained ballet dancer. So I used to do ballet classes with her at home to aid my balance. And when people found that out, when they discovered that I was doing ballet classes, I was getting piss taken out of me royally.
I can imagine.
But my balance improved so much that for the first time in a long time, people were looking at me going, this guy's improved. What's going on? You know, even the guys, the manager that I was playing for at the time said to me, what's going on? You know, he said, you know, your game has improved so much. And I said, well, it's because I'm doing these ballet classes with my girlfriend. And he was actually quite surprised. But, you know, I mean, I was in my 20s when this was going on. So I'd already had, like 10 years of football or more behind me. And then people were suddenly seeing a massive improvement in my game because of the balance. So I really understand where Pop Robson went with that, because I went through a very similar thing. I didn't know that. Thank you. That's actually nice to know that I have a similarity with the great Pop Robson.
So anybody watching that's an aspiring footballer, you might want to take ballet lessons or dance at the very least.
Dance, yeah.
There you go.
Martial arts helped me a lot as well, actually, to be fair.
Can't be bad. He could have been the next Bruce Lee, ladies and gentlemen. But
no.
There you go. Right, so we've got two.
However, beat Brian Jacks in a friendly competition once, and he was one of our Olympic winners.
I met him in about 85, 86, something like that.
Yeah.
So
he was an Olympic gold medalist.
I think he was bronze medalist.
Bronze medalist, that's correct, yeah. And I beat him in competition, in a friendly competition, about 2 years before he actually went to the Olympics. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got two heads adorned on the side of your mountain.
Yep,
we've got Martin Peters, and now he's been joined by Pop Robson. So, number 3 on your hit list, who you got for me, mate?
I have got one of the most dynamic strikers that West Ham United have ever put out on a pitch. We're calling Frank McAvenny to the stand.
Not Marco Boogers.
No. As much as I loved him, no.
Talk to me about your memories of Frank McAvenny pulling on the claret and blue shirt then much, and why he should be on the side of your mountain.
Obviously, everybody's aware of the partnership that he and Tony Cottee shared and how prolific that was. And again, similarly to when, Pop Robson was playing, you're hearing great things about a pair of players that play for West Ham. And out of the two, the reason I didn't choose Tony Cottee is because I feel that maybe there may be one or two others in your list of guests that may choose him. So I chose McAvenny purely and simply because I felt he was the more dynamic of the two players, and probably more prolific, in my opinion. I think he was more likely to score than Tony Cottee was, as much as I love Tony Cottee. But for me, I just remember Frank and Tony linking up, 1-2s, triangles, balls over the top to each other, nodding the ball down to each other in the box and stuff, and, it was always McAvenny and Cottee, and it was always that way round, and for me, McAvenny had this aura about him. He still does. He still has this aura about him of just pure grace when he came to having a football at his feet. I thought, back then I would challenge anybody to find a more skillful ball player at that time. There were many great footballers around at the time, but for me, McAvenny, and when he left and went back to Celtic, wasn't it? He went to
when he left us, he went to Celtic. Yes, the first time
he went back to Scotland. And went to Celtic. When he left, I was just distraught. I think that's the only word I can think of. And I thought, A, because he was so good for us. B, because he was going back to Scotland, and I didn't feel that Scottish football deserved to have a player like that. No disrespect to Scottish football, but it's just not at the levels, and wasn't then at the levels that the English game was at. And I felt that the English game suffered because McAvenny had gone there. If he'd have gone to someone, let's say for argument's sake, Southampton or Newcastle or anyone like that, it would have hurt, but it probably wouldn't have hurt as much as it did when he went to Scotland. It robbed Division 1 or the Premiership or whatever it was at that time. It robbed the top tier of English football of an absolute magician. And that's exactly what I feel he was. And, I haven't got to do a lot of carving. I've only got to give Frank a quick call and he can just wave his fingers and his face will be there on the side of this mountain. He was that magical.
You know the story about why he left, or
I am aware of it. I am aware of it. To be fair,
Celtic centenary year, basically.
Yeah.
In 87, 88. That was Celtic's centenary year. And obviously Frank growing up was a Celtic fan. So there was a big emotional pull. So I know that he'd have found it difficult. You know, it was Billy McNeil who was the captain in their 67 European Cup winning team, the Lisbon Lions. He was the manager in that season, so I can understand from Frank's point of view that he loved West Ham. I know that he loved West Ham. I've had the opportunity to meet Frank, and he absolutely loves West Ham United. There's no doubt about that. But I can understand that there's a very, very strong historical, emotional pull towards Celtic Football Club, and that in that centenary year he found it very difficult. It was the perfect storm. It was their centenary year. Their European Cup winning captain was the manager. He obviously went there. They actually did the double that season of the league and the cup, and he actually scored two goals in the cup final, which I believe was against Dundee United from memory.
Yeah, I'm fairly sure that's right. Yeah. So you know, the guy was just magical with the ball. Absolutely magical.
Yeah, had a reputation for being a bit of a playboy. In fairness, he did, you know, off the pitch, he probably was just as active as he was on the pitch, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And he also had a bit of a reputation also of not being one that you want to mess with on the pitch either. You know, he was quite a tough lad. You know, and being a Glaswegian, I suppose that kind of makes sense, you know, but he was, I'm not saying that he was ever a violent man. He never was.
No, but you had to take care of yourself in those days.
Yeah, and, you know, he could, you know, give as good as he got, to be fair, you know, but, you know, the one image of him that really grates on me, though, is when they had them real tight high shorts when they were playing in those ridiculous shorts that they had at the time. And for me, that kind of, I just look at that and cringe. You know, I'd like to see him in a pair of modern shorts, if I'm honest with you. You know, it was just a little bit less to be seen. You know what I mean? It was almost, you know, like they were trying to be sexy with the kits, and that's just not what the sport's about, you know. Yeah. But, you know, that other than that, you know, the attire that the poor guy had to wear, he performed miracles on the pitch. And, you know, and in fairness, since his departure from the club, he's had nothing but love and respect for the club, its fans, you know, and its history. So, you know, the guy has earned himself a place on the side of my mountain, that's for sure.
And another player that was a boomerang player, because he came back. He had his spell in Celtic. He did the double with Celtic. He came back to West Ham, and it was fairly apparent that we were going to go sliding into the second division, which is now the Championship.
Yeah.
This is pre-Premier League, ladies and gentlemen. There was football before 1992-93 for those youngsters out there. Football did exist before the Premier League was dreamed up. But he came back, and he tells the story that he actually had the opportunity to sign for George Graham and Arsenal Football Club. And he ended up going to West Ham, who got relegated, and he could have gone to Arsenal, who that season went to Anfield on the last game. Michael Thomas, you remember the commentary from Brian Moore? It's up for grabs now. He scores the goal. They win 2-0, which they needed to win by a 2-goal margin, and Arsenal were crowned the champions. And Frank could have been a part of that, and he didn't. He was like, no, I want to go back to West Ham.
And shows no regret for that decision either.
No, he doesn't. He speaks about it. He's like, it's a decision I made. And that's what
I do like his candid approach as well. You know, I mean, he's very open and honest about, you know, his feelings and his reasoning for stuff and this and that. Yep. You know, he's actually a very, very nice guy. You know, and I think so far I've chosen 3 real nice guys for mine.
Yeah.
mountain.
The shame of it is his second spell didn't quite go the way of his first. Obviously, part of that was because he had his leg broke in an incident. I think it was against Stoke, and it was Chris Kamara of all people who did the deed, which put Macca out for a spell. He's like I say, his second spell wasn't quite as prolific as his first, but what a way to sign off his final match as a West Ham player. I remember the game. We'd already been relegated. We'd gone back up to the first division. It was still the first division then. We'd gone up. We then got relegated at the first attempt.
Yeah.
And the last game of the season, we was at home to Nottingham Forest, mighty Nottingham Forest, managed by Brian Clough. They had Stuart Pearce, they had Des Walker, etc., etc. Nigel Clough was up top. Fantastic team. We was 0-0 at half time, and if I remember rightly, he was on the bench. He got subbed on for Mitchell Thomas, and I think there's a story that Mitchell might not have necessarily been as injured as he made out, but it was, trying to get Frank on the pitch in his farewell game because he knew that his contract wasn't being renewed and he was moving on to pastures new. He comes on the pitch, he scores a hat-trick.
Exactly.
Not a bad farewell.
Not a bad farewell at all from a man that's now immortalised on the side of a mountain.
Can't be bad. So that's 3 of your 4 that you've got up on the side of your mountain there, Budge. I've got to say it's taking shape and it's looking the business, but you've got one more that you can put up there. Think hard, young man. Who are you going to go for?
Well, the person I've chosen, I'll get to him in a moment. I've chosen him for very different reasons to the previous 3.
Yep.
But I'd like to also give an honourable mention to 2 names that I eliminated this morning. After you asked me to record. One of them, Paolo Di Canio. You can't ignore Paolo Di Canio when you're doing something like this. The guy was an absolute superstar. So I'd like to give him an honourable mention. And the other honourable mention would be Stuart Slater. Always loved watching him play. Very, very disappointed when he left the club. And I feel that he needs an honourable mention. But the player that I've gone for, and for very different reasons, as I said to the other 3, is Craig Forrest.
Craig Forrest. Talk to me about Craig Forrest. Why have you chosen him?
Okay. Well, first of all, not many people are going to choose a goalkeeper to start with. And I feel that, goalkeepers are underrated and undervalued by a lot of fans, unless they do something really special. And Craig Forrest in particular, because I happen to actually be friends with him. He's a member of our WhatsApp group, etc. I've spoken to him on screen, in which you were a member of the chat, in the live chat.
I was.
And we have spoken on occasion about his time at West Ham. And, the most important thing about putting Craig Forrest up on this monument is the fact that he can't convince anybody, me included, that he's not a West Ham fan. Because when you speak to him, when you hear him speak, it's completely obvious that he's a West Ham fan. Mm-hmm. The guy, he was a dedicated football player. Now, at 16 years old, a Canadian-born lad chooses to pack his bag, say goodbye to his family, his mum, most of all. No boy wants to leave his mum behind, ever. But he said goodbye to his family. He got on a plane. He got off in London. Or wherever he got off, and then went to Ipswich as a youth player. I'm not sure how that came about, but he went to Ipswich as a young lad, 16 years old, I believe he was, and spent 12 years in the first team, playing for Ipswich. And also while he was at Ipswich, he went on loan to Chelsea. He did, I think, a season-long loan there. He spoke very highly of his time there, that he enjoyed it. He spoke very highly of his time as, first choice goalkeeper at Ipswich. And then he came to West Ham. Now, you got to remember, as a young lad, he was 16. He had no family around him. All he had was his landlady, basically, and the guys at the club, whichever club he was at, which obviously was Ipswich, you know. But when he came to West Ham, he stayed where he was because it wasn't too great a commute for him. He speaks so highly of the treatment that he got at West Ham, knowing full well he came to the club as second choice and perhaps sometimes third choice. You know, he was playing behind goalkeepers like Shaka Hislop, Jamo. I mean, these guys were at the top of their game. I'm not saying that Craig wasn't, but these guys were already superstars kind of thing when they came to the club. They were already big names. And Craig was quite happy to come to the club as second choice, and just play, around 30 first team games for us?
I've got here that he played 30 league matches between 1997 and 2002.
Yeah.
I don't
and
have
there was a number of cup competition games that he played in, I would imagine. Well, I know he did. I don't know the exact number, but it would probably bring him up to somewhere around 40 appearances for the club. Mm-hmm. In a 5-year spell, that's not even 10 per season. But he accepted that. He embraced it. He's proud of it. He's proud of the times he pulled on the shirt and went out on the field. He kept a clean sheet against Chelsea and one or two other clubs as well, Chelsea being the most notable. I think he pulled off a fantastic double save against somebody at one point as well. I believe that was Arsenal, but I'm not 100% certain. But he gave his all while he pulled that shirt on, he was unfortunate to have to wear one of the ugliest kits a goalkeeper's ever had to wear as well. It had multiple colours on it. And
I asked him a question about that, didn't I?
You certainly did. And he describes it as Disney vomit. So, and he wore that shirt with pride, and he said, he goes, we're not given a choice. We're told you're wearing that.
Yeah. That was the question I asked him, wasn't it? Have you ever refused?
Yeah. And he said, yeah. And they told him, you are effing wearing it.
Bloody are.
Yeah. So, the guy he's hilarious. He's got a fantastic sense of humour. He tells some great stories about when he and the lads went out in, his time at West Ham and stuff. And, he was underrated, underappreciated by many West Ham fans. Not all, but many. And because I've got to know him on a personal basis to a degree, I felt that, I would honour that friendship that I have with him by carving him into my monument and forever giving him a place in the club's history with me.
Well, Budge, all I've done is I've been at the bottom of your ladder footing it whilst you've been chipping away with your hammer and chisel. And I've got to say, ladies and gentlemen, we only organised this afternoon. This afternoon, I sent Budgie a message saying any chance, and he's very, very politely and graciously come on the channel, given up his time for this particular venture. And he isn't a stonemasonry expert he wasn't by any stretch of the imagination when YouTube, I sent him the message, but he's very diligently gone onto the internet. He's gone onto YouTube. He's done YouTube tutorials, stonemasonry, and ladies and gentlemen, I've got to say, it is a sight to behold. I'm standing here at the bottom of the ladder. His hands are in bits now. He's done. He's blood everywhere. There's blisters. The skin's hanging.
Can't even pick up a glass of wine.
But I'm looking at the ladder. Allow me to peel back the curtain. Have a look at this. Look at this. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen. That is craftsmanship that you cannot overstate. Look at that. Martin Peters, Brian Pop Robson, Frank McAvenny, and Craig Forrest. Budgie, I've got to commend you. That is outstanding craftsmanship, mate.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. It was an absolute pleasure to create that.
I've got to say, if I was in your shoes, I'd be incredibly proud, mate. Incredibly proud that in the space of a couple of hours, you've gone from being an absolute novice at this.
I thought you were going to call me a knobhead then.
No, I wouldn't be so rude. You've given up your time to come onto the channel and make a contribution to this particular series. And I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope that everybody watching at home has enjoyed it and have taken something out of this particular venture, Budge. So thank you for your time.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure, Rob. Really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. And I have to say, I want to thank you for creating such great content, and giving us opportunity to contribute, and I mean, I love this. I mean, and the fact that you chose Rusty B to be your first guest was quite apt, I think, as you mentioned during that show, you didn't want it to clash with his My Hammers 11 type thing. And it doesn't. It actually doesn't. It's as riveting watching the other guys that have done this as it is, watching any of the Hammers 11s. I wanted to do it, and I kind of hadn't really decided on my final four until you asked me to do it. And I thought, right, okay, now I've got to actually decide on my four, So, I mean, it wasn't a rush job or anything because I only had 6 names to choose from. So I want to give an honourable mention to the 2 that didn't make the side of the mountain.
Please do.
For obvious reasons, Paolo Di Canio.
Oh, very good choice.
That's obvious as to why I've chosen him. I don't need to explain that. And secondly, I wanted to put Stuart Slater on there.
Oh,
because I love Stuart Slater's football. For me, he was an unfinished Scotty Parker, if you like, but equally as talented. But yeah, they were the 2 honourable mentions.
You've got them in as well, mate. I do appreciate your time. And I do appreciate you guys watching at home. And I'd just like to ask you to finish off with, to please don't forget to like, comment on, and share this stream to your social media platforms. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. And make sure you hit the bell icon for alerts on new content. And as always, we thank you very much indeed for your support. Budgie, what are we, mate?
We are massive.
Come on, you Irons!
Get in.
I like your motor badge!